Today, we are trading away these veterans for 2025 rookie picks. This video is from the seller's frame of mind. You're buying picks, you're trying to get younger, you're looking to either get assets to retool, get younger, full-on rebuild, tear it down, and maybe you recognize some of your veteran players are at peak value and you're cashing out on rookie picks that you think are worth more. This video is from the rebuilders frame of mind. The last video that we did was from the contenders frame of mind. In this video, you guys are ideally not trying to win year one. You're trying to get a little bit younger, trying to get rookie picks in 2025. One disclaimer that we have to make is we are estimating market value that should apply for most leagues. Your individual league may differ.
Yeah, and that was the biggest comment we got on last video. Like, oh, my league doesn't view it like this. Or, oh, my league, that would never fly. Listen, there's a whole widespread of micro league markets that you guys have. We are trying to generalize it as much as we can. On top of that, there will be repeats on this video. For example, I mentioned the 104, 105 section, I believe, last video, if you wanted to buy Saquon Barkley. Spoiler alert, he will be on the sell section of this video at a different cost. It really depends what your micro league market is on these players. And that just kind of points to the fact that maybe if you're in your league market and you can buy Saquon for X cost, whereas in another league market, you would have to sell him for a higher price, maybe that should give you a clue onto what those targets are. And like I said, there will also be a different perspective on who is buying and who is selling. Guess what? In the last video, if you were selling picks for veteran players, more likely you are going to try and contend. And then vice versa in this video, if you were setting your veteran players, it is more likely that you are trying to retool your team.
Yeah, absolutely. We're essentially price checking all of these players. Where should they be valued? In our opinions, is lower than maybe you can currently get for them. And also it depends what rookie pick you can get, because given how our rookie rankings are structured, for example, the 101 is Ashton Genty. If you can get the 101, he's the best asset in rookie drafts. 102, 103, 104, it's all going to depend what rookie you're able to get, which is why the market and the overvalued, undervalued stuff can kind of change. So we're going to start with the 101. We're going to go 101 through 112, and we're going to go pick by pick and talk about a veteran that you can sell to get this pick. And again, the reasons you'd be doing this is to try and get younger, try and retool. Maybe you have a surplus at one position. You're trying to get another player to a different position. 101, we have ranked Ashton Genty, as does the entire planet of Earth. Maybe you guys can sell off a guy like Patrick Mahomes for Ashton Genty. And the reason you'd be doing this is Patrick Mahomes is going to be turning 30 this year, trying to get a little bit younger. Maybe you're going into a one-year retool. You already have quarterbacks that are on the come up. Maybe you hit on a Bo Nix in your rookie draft last year. You didn't think he was going to be much, and he turned into a top quarterback for you.
Yeah, this would be specifically, again, if you are selling Patrick Mahomes, we're not saying, oh yeah, of course he is the best quarterback on earth. Problem is the production has tailed off. He is getting older, like you said. And maybe you're in a situation where you have Caleb Williams, Patrick Mahomes, and Bo Nix as your quarterback core. You're not planning to compete within the next couple of years. Selling Patrick Mahomes for Ashton Genty would make a reasonable amount of sense. You maneuver some of your asset value over to the running back position. You get younger inherently, moving from Mahomes to Genty. I think that's a fine move to make before everybody hops in the comments. Why would you sell Mahomes? That would be the rationale as to why you would do so. Similar rationale for me with Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's more so comes from a structural perspective. If you're strong at wide receiver, maybe you listened to us in the last couple of years, really built out your wide receiver core. Maybe you have, the 102, the 104, the 107 this year, and you're planning to spend it on Travis Hunter, Tedero McMillan, and Emeka Egbuka. At that point, if you already have an Amon-Ra St. Brown on your roster, I would feel perfectly fine sending Amon-Ra St. Brown, getting Ashton Genty, getting access to a running back I believe can put up. If he reaches his potential, I don't think a 2019 CMC year, a 2024 Saquon Barkley year would be out of the range of outcomes for Ashton Genty on his rookie contract. 3-down player, big-time workload on the Raiders. And like I said, if you're already set at wide receiver, maybe think of moving an Amon-Ra St. Brown type for him.
Yeah, and full disclosure, this first tier is 101 players. Players who are worth the 101 are inherently elite players. So the only reason you'd be selling a guy like Patrick Mahomes or Amon-Ra St. Brown is if it's for youth reasons for Mahomes, structural reasons, quarterback position reasons, wide receiver position reasons. That's why you'd be making a move like this. Full disclosure, though, ideally you'd get maybe even a plus on top of Ashton Genty for selling off, Patrick Mahomes or Amon-Ra St. Brown or something like that, because you don't really want to sell off the best quarterback on the planet. The reason you're doing it is because he's had a couple of down years. He's going to be turning 30 soon. Maybe he starts to taper off and lose some value. And if you're entering a 1 to 2 to 3 year rebuild, you probably can't afford to hold a guy like that through a rebuild. If he does start to lose value, you might as well get a guy in Genty who can only gain value going forward.
Yeah, the other full disclosure we want to point, like you said, these are 101 worthy players. Obviously, ideally, if you can get up to Genty using other players and plus, be my guest. This specific video is only what is the pick and what is the exact player if it was a 1-for-1 situation. So for those of you saying, oh yeah, I can just put a package together, that is already implied.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can put a package of 3 players that are worth 108 to 112, that gets you to the 101, then obviously go do that instead. So moving into the 102, what players would we be trading straight up for Travis Hunter, essentially, because that is where we have Travis Hunter valued. And the player that I came up with here, again, is a quarterback in Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is actually like my quarterback 14, quarterback 15, I believe, right now. And it's mainly for the same reason that I had Mahomes as the 101 answer, is that if you have a veteran quarterback in Justin Herbert is now entering an age bracket where he's not going to really gain any more value. He's 27 years old. If he has another good year, it's not like he's suddenly going to be the quarterback 3 in Dynasty like Jaden Daniels did after his rookie season. Everybody already knows Justin Herbert is good. If Justin Herbert has a good year this year, it's not going to really help him gain any value. And the reason you could sell Justin Herbert off for the 102 is from like a redraft range of outcomes standpoint. He doesn't actually have that great of a projection this year. You look at him, he's probably going to go off the board quarterback 14 through 18 because it's a run-heavy offense. They just drafted a first-round running back in Amari and Hampton. Doesn't have an excellent pass-catching weapons core. Why would you invest in Justin Herbert when the only real thing that you're excited about is the fact that he's an elite NFL quarterback and he's not going to lose value for that reason? You're not really excited about his short-term projection, which you should be if you have a 102 caliber asset. And for me, if you're trying to get younger, if you're trying to pivot into a rebuild, selling Justin Herbert straight up for a guy like Travis Hunter would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the conversation isn't, Justin Herbert, for my money, is a top 5 to 6 quarterback on earth. That is not the situation we're talking about here. However, they just invested 22nd overall into a running back, a team that was 31st in pass rate over expectation the first 7 weeks of last year, that wanted to run the football, but couldn't because their running backs they had with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards were unreliable on a week-to-week basis, were unreliable from an injury perspective. They add a running back this offseason. Are they all of a sudden going to throw the ball more than they intended to in those first 7 weeks of last year? On top of that, you mentioned his ADP over on Underdog. He's currently the quarterback 15 on Underdog. And quite frankly, I see quarterbacks that are ranked under him that I would take comfortably from a 1-year projection perspective. Jordan Love with Green Bay. He's going to be healthy. We saw a couple years ago, 30 touchdown level upside. I don't think that's outrageous. Dak Prescott. Again, quarterback 2 in terms of MVP voting a couple years ago, 37 passing touchdowns. I don't think that should be a hot take. I think once the take starts getting a little bit cloudy is like CJ Stroud or Justin Herbert on 1-year sample. The other one, I would take Trevor Lawrence straight up next year over Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I don't think that's outrageous. Like, again, it's a little bit with Justin Herbert, it's a little bit of a disconnect from real life and fantasy, but He's a pocket quarterback who doesn't run, who doesn't have a lot of passing volume and doesn't have elite weapons to throw to, at least in terms of how much they're going to, like, the guy's thrown 23, 20, and 25 passing touchdowns the last 3 seasons. It's not like you're getting 35 passing touchdown upside. And when you're a 27-year-old quarterback in Dynasty, what you represent as far as a long-term value gain standpoint is pretty much negligible at that point in time. And you really are focusing more on what your redraft projection is for the next 3 to 4 calendar years. And that's why I have Baker Mayfield ranked over him. It's like Baker Mayfield's going to be much better in fantasy than Justin Herbert this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't have Baker over him, but I think like you're not outrageous for saying like, yeah, Baker Mayfield on a 3-year sample will outproduce Justin Herbert these next 3 years. Obviously, once you factor in age a little bit, I would still slightly take Herbert, but I think that's a conversation to be had, man. Justin Herbert is a guy that's kind of been viewed as a fringe top 10 level dynasty quarterback. I think we should start looking at him more so in that high-end dynasty quarterback 2 range, and especially when it comes in relation to Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter, for me, is already a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. I'm making that transition. Another transition
could be Hampton for what it's worth, too. If you would prefer Hampton at 102, you could talk me into that. Like, dude, and just
Charger for Charger.
Exactly. One last point on the Baker thing. He had 20 more touchdowns than Justin Herbert last year.
Which is insane. Yeah. So we'll move on to my player here. And it's another receiver that I cannot believe for the life of me is valued over Travis Hunter in our expert rankings. Quite frankly, I'm really disappointed this is the fact. Why are we taking Jackson Smith-Njigba over Travis Hunter? Travis Hunter, infinitely better prospect. Travis Hunter goes 2nd overall to a team that is predominantly going to play him on offense. And we're valuing JSN's 14.9 PPR points per game, wide receiver 20 points per game year this year as the 102.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is that people are excited about Jackson Smith-Njigba. He was the best prospect in his draft year when he came out and had a good second season. but like he has a quarterback downgrade in Geno. Like Geno leaves and Sam Darnold comes in. That's a quarterback downgrade. I think pass volume wise, the way that Ryan Grubb was operating that offense was very friendly to Jackson Smith-Njigba, which is why you and I were high on Jackson Smith-Njigba from a redraft standpoint coming into the year. I think he should be more valued 104, 105. I don't think 102 is where he should be valued, especially even if you talked about him versus Tetairoa McMillan. I would rather have Tetairoa McMillan over Jackson Smith-Njigba. So yeah, I think he's just generally a little bit overvalued right now, which is why we said at the beginning of this video, it could be because you're tearing it down. It could be because you're retooling, but it also could be just that one of your players is overvalued, and Jackson Smith-Njigba is precisely that.
I could not believe for the life of me that people actually have JSN over Travis Hunter. Are they just being fear-mongered by potential defensive usage? Like, there is nothing on the football field that JSN does better than Travis Hunter. Let's get that out of the way.
Well, yeah, it's not even just Hunter, just other receivers in that range that are being valued. Like, I would rather have McConkey than Jackson Smith-Njigba as well. And like I said, with Tetairoa McMillan, I'd rather have him than Jackson Smith-Njigba too. So I think it's more that just people, because JSN had that monster game and, he was really good down the stretch last season, you expect him to keep ascending, but a lot has changed in his situation to make you think that maybe that was, not his peak. I don't want to say a 23, 24-year-old wide receiver is not going to get any better still, but a lot ran well for him is what I would say.
It's very much way more pro Hunter than it is JSN. I obviously hopped on. I had to make the negative case for JSN. JSN is still a clear top 15 overall dynasty wide receiver. But when the equatable cost is Travis Hunter, who I think has the opportunity to quite literally be a first-team All-Pro at wide receiver in his career, there's just levels to this shit.
Yeah, and also I do need to point out that we use points per game in this household, so nobody come out here and be like, JSN finished as like wide receiver 8 last year, or whatever his finish was, because I don't know what it was, but he played 17 games, so obviously he was going to finish high. But yeah, 14.9 points per game, wide receiver 17, not difference-making production. Like Zay Flowers is essentially the same caliber of production as that on a points per game basis. Like, and nobody's going crazy to trade for Zay Flowers, even though I repeatedly beg people to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess JSN just being fancy Zay Flowers is something we need to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, like Zay Flowers, 12.3 points per game, but if you take splits when he was actually healthy and all that kind of stuff, he probably would have been better. Anyways,
we would take JSN over Flowers before anybody gets
yeah, I would take JSN over Flowers, but my point is it's not a huge difference, especially knowing that Flowers is in a situation with Lamar Jackson. It's not changed, and JSN now is Cooper Kupp, compete with slot staffs with, and obviously DK Metcalf was going to stretch the field and help him out. Anyways, 103 tier, we have Amari Hampton valued at 103.
The Eagles.
So essentially this question is, would you rather have Amari Hampton or these players, which is basically all of these questions here. Is if you're tearing it down, you should probably want to move off of aging players. And that's why we have Saquon Barkley listed here. Because if you were a contender, conversely in the video we did yesterday, and you could sell the 104 for Saquon Barkley and you have a clear top 3 team in your league, that would obviously make sense. But Amari Hampton, I have ranked straight up over Saquon Barkley in Dynasty. He's a first-round running back, a workhorse prospect, comparable to Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, and Jonathan Taylor in the prospect model. This is a dude that if he has a great season this year, is going to be worth multiple first-round picks on the open market. And he already probably is worth 2 first-round picks on the open market. So yeah, Saquon Barkley, great player. But in most situations, the reason you'd be trading a player for a pick is because you're looking to get younger and looking to rebuild and looking to maybe even tear it down. And Saquon for Hampton is a 1-for-1 swap that makes sense for both parties, because presumably the person trading for Saquon is also looking for a contending asset.
It's the difference between production value versus implied market value. If you're a rebuilding team, you don't care about Saquon's production value. Saquon Barkley just had one of the best running back seasons we have ever seen, but his market is capped at being below Jahmyr Gibbs, below Bijan Robinson, below Ashton Genty. If Amari Hampton goes out next year and ran for 1,300 yards, 4.7 yards per carry, 13 touchdowns from scrimmage, he will be a tier 1 dynasty asset at running back. That is the difference here. Again, if you have Saquon and you're a competitive team, ride him to the sunset. He's probably going to be a top 3 scoring running back for the next couple of years. But if you are not ready to compete this upcoming year, take the implied market value advantage that Amari Hampton has. Again, I'm not saying that, Saquon Barkley sucks. Saquon Barkley is worth nothing. In fact, I have Omarion and Saquon in the same tier of my dynasty rankings. But if you're a young team, you have no use for a 27-year-old running back.
He's 28, actually.
28,
and here's the other thing about Saquon Barkley. Saquon could have exactly the same season again next year. Same exact numbers as he had the year before. He'll go down in value.
Yep. And that's just the unfortunate part of the running back position. He is just basically at this point the new Christian McCaffrey in terms of what we thought about McCaffrey a couple of years ago, where he's always going to be in that top 4 to 7 range at running back in Dynasty. But if he does have a year where he's banged up, now McCaffrey is what, the RB16 on the market?
Yeah, and Barkley would drop pretty quickly if he got banged up. If I told you I had a stock, you own a stock in your portfolio, and I said this guy's absolutely never going to go any higher, wouldn't you consider selling said stock in that situation? That's exactly what we're talking about with Barkley. Obviously, contending teams don't sell Saquon Barkley, but if you are contending and trying to get younger, retool, rebuild, tear it down, etc., this is about the return you should expect for Saquon.
Yeah, and similar case to be made for AJ Brown, stud real life player. The unfortunate part, though, is instead of having high-end wide receiver one level production on a per game basis, because of the context of the low passing volume in this offense, you're more so looking at a mid to back end wide receiver one, which is fine. If you're competing, you're going to use top 12, top 8 overall numbers. But realistically, in this range at 103, if you can trade a 28-year-old wide receiver for a running back that has legitimate top 1, top 3 overall upside on the market, I think you have to be doing your due diligence, especially if you're not competing this year.
Yeah, not to mention you could also get Hunter with this selection, and you're just essentially getting younger at the wide receiver position. Or I mean, you could take McMillan here too, but I would probably go Hampton over McMillan. Yeah, like AJ Brown, 16.7, 17.0, and 17.6 PPR points per game the last 3 years. Excellent numbers. Top 12 numbers every single year, 8, 8, and 12, respectively, this past season. But Travis Hunter puts up numbers like that in his rookie year. He'll be the dynasty wide receiver 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah. It won't even be close either. Like I think there's a real possibility you're talking about a mid first round starter pick if Travis Hunter averaged 17 points per game. That's just how the market works.
We're using ifs, obviously. AJ Brown's a proven commodity. Travis Hunter is not. If you're a conservative dynasty player, you might not have, you might not feel good about trading a known asset for a non-known asset. But again, we're projecting with these top end guys, especially when you're picking 101, 102, 103, 104, there's a reason. The dynasty market's pretty savvy at pricing these guys. And if everybody's in agreement that these guys are really high, it's because they're really good prospects. And that's why you can handle getting younger and tearing down and maybe undergoing a little bit of risk that they haven't done it yet in the NFL. So 104, we have T-Mac valued here, Tedero McMillan. T. Higgins and Garrett Wilson are the two players we have listed here. There's not a ton of guys that are going around the 104 that are overvalued, or a ton of guys going around the 104 that are aging assets that you need to get off of if you're trying to rebuild. But T. Higgins is one of them because he just had his best season of his career this past year. And Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense, we expect it to be very good, expect it to be very pass heavy going forward. But let's face it, T. Higgins has his contract now. He has no incentive not to sit out a couple games if he's dealing with an injury, which has been an issue for him in the past. And T. Higgins is also 26 years old, probably not going up in dynasty market value anytime soon. He is pretty much peaked in terms of where he's going to be. He's a fringe top 15 dynasty receiver. As long as Jamar Chase is there, he ain't going any higher than that. So if you're trying to get younger, take a 26-year-old receiver, turn it into a 22-year-old receiver in Tedero McMillan, I think that would make sense.
Yeah, and same scenario for me, obviously, with Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson comparatively is a little bit younger than T. Higgins, but Garrett Wilson hasn't proven nearly as much as T. Higgins in terms of overall point per game ceiling. For example, he's never had, a fantasy playoffs like the way T. Higgins had at the end of last season. With Garrett Wilson, I think he's a very talented player. However, we have to look at the facts here. Justin Fields is signed for 3 years. That is not the accurate quarterback situation, the 4,500 plus passing yard, 30 plus passing touchdown type of situation we're hoping for quarterbacks. A. B, if Garrett Wilson has another season like it has the last few years, how much market value is he going to lose?
Yeah, he would lose a bit of market value. And for what it's worth, he outproduced JSN on a points per game basis last year. It doesn't feel like it for a lot of people in terms of how
He's
people
1 year older,
JSN
right?
season versus how people perceive Garrett Wilson season. You wouldn't think Garrett Wilson was the one who outproduced him.
Yeah, that is actually fucking hilarious. And that's funny to look at. But regardless, with Garrett Wilson, like you said, if he doesn't have if he has another year similar to the last couple, he'll be going on 26 without a need of moving season. There's a real possibility that the way we're looking at,
he's the new Terry McLaurin at that point.
Yeah, Terry McLaurin, like Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore. Yeah. I mean, obviously Ayuk tore his ACL, but Ayuk, for example, had a big fall from grace. Obviously, the knee does have a concern, but even before the knee, he wasn't very productive. The point being is if you get to the age of 26 without having elite, 16 and a half, 17 plus PPR point per game upside, you're just a dime a dozen.
Yeah, like at one point in Garrett Wilson's career after his rookie season, for example, we all thought, hey, this is a guy that could ascend his way all the way to be as good as Jeffersons and Lambs and, Amon-Ra's and Pukas and Brian Thomas Jr.'s. And until we see it, frankly, we just don't know that he's capable of doing that. He gets a lot of targets and he's pretty productive, relatively speaking. It was his best season of his career last year, but given expectation, people have a little bit of concern for Garrett Wilson. So you wouldn't really be selling Garrett Wilson as a contender going into a rebuild because he's too old, because that's not true. It's just that he's a volatile asset and you could cash out for Tet McMillan and re-roll right away.
Exactly. It's all about the re-roll. Tet McMillan, obviously, if he has even a comparable season to what Garrett Wilson has had, let's just say 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns as a rookie, which is very possible as the number one in Carolina. We both believe that a situation he can really show himself out in. If he had that as a rookie, he would be a top 12 overall dynasty wide receiver. If Garrett Wilson had that next year, is he the dynasty wide receiver 23? Is he the dynasty wide receiver 25? Like, what are we looking at?
Yeah, anything other than 1,300 yards and 7 touchdowns is probably going to be looked at as like a fall from grace for Garrett Wilson because of what he's already done so far to this point in his career. He's been 1,000 yards, 3 to 7 touchdowns every year. We need to see more from him, which is why people might sour on him quickly as a dynasty asset, like we kind of just talked about. Moving into the 105, 106, which as we talked about in the last video, we have Cam Ward and Trevion Henderson valued here in superflex formats. In one quarterback formats, this would essentially just be a Trevion Henderson tier. Dak Prescott is the name that I wrote down as a potential sell. Now, again, Danny, of course, might die in his seat for me saying I would sell Dak Prescott. But the reason I say he's a sell is because if you can re-roll him into Cam Ward and you're trying to rebuild, that makes sense because it's a young quarterback versus a 32-year-old quarterback. If you can re-roll him into Trevion Henderson because for whatever reason you have quarterbacks to spare and you need a running back and you're looking to get a really young potential stud in Trevion Henderson, that would make sense. I actually think, generally speaking, Dak Prescott's somewhat undervalued relative to the production that he's probably going to give you. But at the same time, he is 32 years old. He ain't getting any more valuable on the open market. So if you can cash out for him and you're trying to tear it down, you're trying to retool, you're trying to get younger, he is the type of asset that would be pretty high up on your list when you look at your roster as guys that you feel like you need to sell going into a rebuild.
Oh, Bush, that's completely out. No, I'm kidding. You're completely on the dot there. I love Dak Prescott. He is completely team dependent, like you said. He is an aging quarterback, 1993 birthday at this point. That's 7 years older than me. That's 5 years older than me. Like he's up there. He has his kids now. He's married. Like he's a grown man. And quite frankly, you don't need many grown men when you're trying to tear it down. So I would agree, especially too, when you're dealing in the range and you want to get younger and you can get a Cam Ward or you can get a top 10 dynasty running back at 22 years old, Trevion Henderson. If you don't need Dak's production, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, people viewed probably Geno Smith as like an ancient quarterback on the open market. He's like 2 years older than Dak Prescott. Like it's not like Dak is like significantly younger than even a guy like Geno Smith. And he's also like a full year and a half older than Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield too. So he is he's not gaining any value anytime soon. As soon as Dak Prescott has a bad season, like let's say
we've already seen it.
Yeah, we've already seen it. Like he's already, like 2 years ago when you and I were making content, he was a 1-2 turn pick when he was 28, 29 years old. And then he had a couple bad seasons, some injuries and that kind of thing. And now he's like a 5th round, 6th round startup pick.
Yeah, which again, if you're in a startup and you're competing, I'm absolutely okay with it. But if you're getting offered the 105, 106, I'm perfectly fine with it if you're trying to tear it down. Likewise with this name. Listen, I love Rashee Rice. I think he's a very good player. The problem is, though, is Rashee Rice has a potential looming suspension and is recovering from that knee injury. I'm not saying in every single situation you want to sell Rashee Rice, but if you can re-roll him into a first overall quarterback or a top 10 dynasty running back, this is the market price I'm okay with letting him go. Not too far off of my rankings. Again, he's just behind those guys, but I also think from a value perspective, from a long-term asset perspective, he is those two are much safer than Rashee Rice is. Because if he goes out there and he has another injury or has another suspension, or maybe isn't as productive as he was pre-injury, there's just so much risk baked in. Again, there's a lot of reward here because he could end up being a mid to high end wide receiver 1 like he was at the beginning of last year. But there's just so much risk around it to the point where if you don't need that production, it's not worth holding.
He's one of the riskiest assets in all of Dynasty.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because if you think about just like from a real life human's perspective, if you're kind of a knucklehead, which Rashee Rice clearly is, like just go look at the footage of the car accident he got. He literally fled the scene. Like he's a class A knucklehead in my opinion, but he's also a very talented football player and he's been really productive when he's on the field. He wasn't a great prospect. He is a knucklehead. He has suspension and injury issues. That is a lot of stacking risk for one player. And we've seen guys like, for example, a Christian Watson or a Chase Claypool or whatever, like flash in the pan a little bit and then kind of disappear and fade away in the dynasty realm. And it wouldn't shock me if, because to be a great NFL receiver, you need to work hard. You need to get better at the things you're not good at. You need to improve every single year. Like, look at a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. When you watch that receiver documentary,
you love him.
Every single game he's putting in every 110% what he can do. NFL teams might figure out how to stop Rashee Rice, especially if he's a little limited coming off of the injury. So I just don't like investing in guys that I don't think work very hard. Like, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that's also a fair take. However, I will combat that, comparing him to like the Watson archetypes. Like, they are different.
I think Chase Claypool was not much different from Rashee Rice. He had a really productive rookie.
Big difference
like
in production.
Rashee Rice did.
I mean, Rashee Rice was getting 8 to 10 targets per game in a slot role for Patrick Mahomes. I don't think those are equivalent situations. I'm still willing to bake in the fact that Rashee Rice has crazy upside. But like you said, the mitigating factors here are there's just way too much risk on the table.
Yeah, exactly. Why would you not cash out? You didn't pay the 105 or the 106 for Rashee Rice. If you draft him, you probably got him in the mid-second round. Yeah. Why not take the guaranteed profit of a Cam Ward or a Trevion Henderson? Like, you might as well, or just the pick value that you get for those guys. So moving into 107, 108, again, we have Emeka Egbuka, Quinshon Judkins among rookies ranked in here. So we're talking back-end wide receiver 2 in Dynasty, Emeka Egbuka, and then Quinshon Judkins, a back-end RB1 in Dynasty, or high-end RB2 at the very least. The guys that I would be selling in this territory would be Michael Penix and Josh Jacobs for very different reasons. Michael Penix, because I just frankly don't believe that much in the quarterback. We've talked about it on many occasions. Many of you guys disagree in the comments. That's totally fine. I didn't love the prospect. I saw him beat up on some, JV defenses in 3 games last year. And I'm not convinced that the Falcons really know what they're doing, given what they just did in the NFL draft and sold their pick for James Pierce, who apparently had attitude issues and all that kind of stuff.
1 and a 2.
Michael Penix is a fine bet to make because he was a solid quarterback prospect. I'm not saying he was like a terrible prospect or anything, but it's similar to Rice. I just think it's a risk mitigation move. He has high value right now, and that might not be the case if things don't go well for him year 2 of him starting. He finally has the reins here. And then Jacobs is a very simple case. He's 28 years old, or going to be 28 years old throughout the year. So, I mean, if you're rebuilding, if you're tearing it down, he's going to be a productive running back that any contender will want.
Yeah, again, it comes back to the production value versus the future market implied value. And realistically, with Josh Jacobs, he's not gaining any value. The value you're gaining from Jacobs is production. Whereas whoever you get at 107, 108, Judkins, Egbuka, we can project being higher on the market this time next year than Jacobs. And in terms of Penix, like you said, that's more so a micro player evaluation. He does have the upside to smash the 107, 108 in value. We just don't think he's that caliber of player. It's really a player take. Again, a lot of these are market-based based off the players that we've announced already. Penix specifically is a micro player-based take. If this was, even JJ McCarthy, I believe a little bit more than JJ McCarthy than I do in Penix, it really just comes down to the fact that Penix wasn't really viewed highly for us in our prospect profiles, and we're willing to be wrong if he does end up being a big-time quarterback.
Yeah, it's similar to JSN. I just think that's an overvalued player.
Yeah, exactly. My 2 guys, Jared Goff and Jonathan Taylor. Very, very similar case to Jonathan Taylor that you made for Josh Jacobs. This is his last year as a permanent member for the Colts, because the Colts do have an out on his contract this year. Colts did add DJ Giddens in the draft. I think there's a real possibility that Jonathan Taylor, come the 2026 season, is not a member of the Indianapolis Colts. But even aside from that factor, he's been banged up, hasn't really given you that needle-moving production since 2020. And if you can liquidate him now into a top 8 overall rookie pick, fresh start with Quinshon Judkins, fresh start with Emeka Egbuka, I would be willing to do that for Jonathan Taylor. Jared Goff, very similar principle to what you made for Dak, only I think he's even more volatile. First of all, I don't think he's as good of a quarterback as Dak, but even aside from that, does lose Ben Johnson. This is an offense that scored 33 points per game last year. I'm very curious to see what the new offensive coordinator has in mind in terms of trying to level the ship.
Yeah, the reason that Jonathan Taylor makes such a good trade off of candidate, where you, if you're trying to tear it down, you get off of Jonathan Taylor, is because from weeks 1 to 12 last year, Jonathan Taylor had 4 games where he was an RB2 or better on any given week. But then from week 13 through
he's a league winner.
he was dominant and a league winner. So he's like off of a high right now. And we all know Jonathan Taylor is a great player. We're not saying that Jonathan Taylor isn't a good player. It's just that he has like over 2,000 touches under his belt dating back to college. And he's been banged up in the past. And he also is a little bit more of a fragile dynasty asset, knowing that he had really needle moving production for about a 6-week stretch last year. But since 2022, that's pretty much all the needle moving production we've seen.
So question, where did Jonathan Taylor go in his NFL draft?
He went at the top of the second round.
And Quinshon Judkins went where?
Top of the second round.
So why
here's
if you're not competing, why wouldn't you re-roll into the younger players?
Exactly. And if you're not competing, re-roll into Quinshon Judkins, not to mention like league to legue, I think his price could vary that you could get somebody better than Quinshon. Like you might be able to get 103 to 105.
Like at Henderson too?
Taylor in some leagues.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Pretty much though, the basis here, we don't hate Josh Jacobs. We don't hate Michael, or maybe we might hate Michael Penix, but we don't hate Jonathan Taylor. We don't hate Jared Goff. They're aging assets. You got to get off your team if you're not competing. We'll head on to the 109, 110. Similar-ish principle with two of these guys, which is funny enough because they're the wide receivers, and they both kind of represent the same thing.
Yeah, so we have Golden and the tight ends valued around this range, 109 to 110. So if you're trying to pivot into Matthew Golden specifically, DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin are good options to do that from. If you're trying to tear it down, DJ Moore just had Luther Burden and Colston Loveland added to his situation while also having Rome Odunze there. And it sounds like the coaching staff is not super high on DJ Moore's abilities. And maybe he'll be on a different team or whatever, but third NFL team, do we really think he's going to gain value at this point? DJ Moore is a good player. He's a great wide receiver 3, maybe wide receiver 2 production piece on a good situation. But is DJ Moore ever going to give you a year like we saw from him that first year in Chicago with Justin Fields? I don't think you're getting a season like that ever again from DJ Moore.
So DJ Moore last year, for reference, compared to his 2023 season. In 2023, he turned 96 receptions into nearly 1,400 receiving yards and 8 receiving touchdowns. Last year, on 2 more receptions, had nearly 400 less yards and 2 less touchdowns.
He's 28 too. Like he's not going up in value anytime soon. If he's not giving you needle moving production, again, once a wide receiver is 26, 27 years old, it does become a lot more about the redraft, 1 to 2 to 3 year projection with these guys. Where's DJ Moore going to go in redraft this year? Realistically,
I'll take a look right now. DJ Moore is currently listed as the wide receiver 21 at 42nd overall, and 42nd overall specifically because it's an underdog wide receiver thirst room. And the majority of your redraft leagues at home, probably going to be, like you said, probably a 5th round pick is my guess.
Yeah. So it's like, that's not needle moving production. Whereas Matthew Golden, I have valued straight up over DJ Moore right now in Dynasty. And Matthew Golden has the opportunity to really, really climb up the value charts and be pretty quickly as productive as DJ Moore has been here. So like, as much as you specifically, you're a big, Chicago Bears guy. I love the Chicago Bears. I think DJ Moore is going to be the odd man out here eventually.
I agree. He to me, out of those weapons on the team right now, with Loveland, with Odunze, with Burden, obviously the investment with those two guys, specifically Loveland and Burden this offseason, with Rome Odunze being a former top 10 pick, Ryan Poles made the pick, paired up with Caleb Williams out of his draft class. The odd man out here is DJ Moore.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have Terry McLaurin listed here. Is, again, very similar to Jacob and Taylor. Good players, good immediate projections. He's just old.
Yeah, and realistically, again, he had a good season. I'm not going to take that away from him, but his good season this past year was 15.8 points per game. Sure, if you look at on the season holistically, total points, he's going to pop more. On a points per game basis, he was less than Drake London. He was just above Devontae Smith. He was just above Stephon Diggs, Lab McConkey. I don't know, man. I'm not really fretting over 15.8 points per game from a 29-year-old.
He'll be 30 in September.
30. Right, yeah, I guess you have that access to. I'm more so just spitballing when I'm guessing the ages. So good to see I'm relatively close there.
Yeah, no, he'll be 30 in September. So if McLaurin's, it wouldn't shock me if the next 2 to 3 years of his career were his best seasons. Let me just be perfectly clear about that, because Jaden Daniels is obviously a dude. And that could be a huge, huge deal for him because he's never had a quarterback up until last year. But Terry McLaurin, if you're rebuilding, which is what 90% of the people watching this video would be doing if you're trying to trade away players for picks. Guy's 30 years old. You should be selling him for picks.
Think of it like this. Last year, if you tried to sell Terry McLaurin, you're getting anything better than a mid-second?
No.
And now this year, you could potentially get the 109 or 110.
And maybe more, depending on the league.
If he doesn't have a season replicating exactly last year, maybe that I'm not saying he's going to inherently get worse at football, but maybe that 15.8 points per game, maybe he scores a couple less touchdowns, or maybe Deebo Samuel, siphons up some volume. What if that becomes 15.3 points per game? What is he worth on the open market? Anything more
Probably
than
a
a
bit
mid-second?
less. Because the other thing too is this happened with Stroud last year, right? Where you have a rookie quarterback who has that great of a season. You're just going to assume he ultimately gets better. But what if he stays the same or gets worse? Like teams get tape on Jaden Daniels. They're able to figure him out a little bit more. Like you said, Deebo, more target competition there. So again, Terry McLaurin could have pretty much exactly the same production this year as he had last year, and he would probably lose value because he'll then be 30 years old. And think about some of the other 30-year-old receivers, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, those type of guys. They ain't worth what Terry McLaurin's worth right now in the open market.
Nope. But we talked about the two wide receivers. Let's briefly talk about the running backs, and then we'll head into the 111, 112. Your running back, Kenneth Walker, completely agree. If you get the 109, 110 for Kenneth Walker at this point, he had a 5-week stretch where people thought he was a top 5 running back, and then he went back to straight being Kenneth Walker right after that.
Yeah, like Charbonnet's really nipping at his heels in terms of a workload right now. And not to mention, too, like you will get Judkins sliding to 109 sometimes. And if you could somehow swap Walker for Judkins straight up, that's just a move that you have to make, in my opinion. Like I would take Kenneth Walker over Caleb Johnson. So I wouldn't sell him if the pick that you're about to make is just, I'm going to sell Kenneth Walker for this pick, and then I'm going to take Caleb Johnson with this pick. I probably wouldn't do that. But if you're a rebuilding team,
I would take Caleb over Kenneth.
I personally wouldn't. I would still take Walker. But if you were a rebuilding team, it's not that Kenneth Walker is old, but he is 24 and a half years old and entering a contract year. He might have his best years behind him. It's possible. The running back position is not kind once you get onto your second contract and so on and so forth. So for me, I look at Kenneth Walker as a guy that if I could just, all things being equal, I had equally as good of a running back core as a wide receiver core, and I could swap him straight for Matthew Golden or one of the tight ends or something, I would probably just do that.
Yeah, and then my guy would be Kyren Williams. Again, we differ a little bit on our projection for
I would want more than 109 to 110 because I think his projection's worth that price.
See, and that's the thing. I don't think that projection is permanent because he's been a big-time workload player, but he's been one of the most inefficient players on those workloads, specifically when it comes to breaking off big plays. And all we've heard this offseason is creating varied looks in their run game from the Rams. I mentioned that when I talked about being Jarquez Hunter. Maybe that even involves Blake Corum. Regardless, though, I think that statement alone is an indictment on Kyren Williams' potential workload. He has been one of the safest workload projections in the last couple of years. And given his inefficiencies this past year, I don't see him being a 23 opportunity per game type of back anymore.
Yeah. I can fully acknowledge and recognize that you're probably getting one more elite year out of Kyren Williams, and he might not have more elite years after that. But I think you're only taking half of the true story of it, saying he was inefficient, because in 2023, he was a top 8 running back in EPA and a top 10 running back in rush yards over expected. So he was inefficient last year, but he wasn't inefficient in 2023.
So he had one of the biggest carry workloads last year. I believe the stat was he had 6 carries of over 15 yards.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like last year, he was inefficient and he wasn't able to break off long runs. But in 2023, he actually did quite a good job of doing that.
Yeah, but after the inefficient years, when we heard McVay say he wants to vary his look. So I'm putting 2 and 2 together here.
Of course, yeah. I don't disagree that he might be worth shopping. I think I would want more than the 109, 110. And again, if you're selling Kyren Williams, there's a good chance you're probably not contending and you're selling him to a contender. But he is only 24.7 years old right now, and he'll be 25 when the season starts. It's not like he's like super old that you'd have to get him off of your team. I actually tend to think that people have a lot of questions about Kyren Williams, and once we see the production on the field, you might get more for him then.
Maybe, but my question is, I don't think he'll get that volume. Like, I don't think he'll be a 23 opportunity per game back. And if you're getting an inefficient player going from 22, 23 opportunities per game down to, even if we gave him 17, 18, because Corum and Jarquez Hunter combined for 5 more touches per game, that goes from being a mid-end running back 1 projection to a high-end running back 2.
Yeah, I mean, he had 15.8 weighted opportunities per game last year, and he was the top 10 running back in fantasy.
15.8
weighted opportunities.
Oh, okay.
Weighted opportunities, not total opportunities. He had 19.8 carries per game. Okay, like when you weight out the opportunities for how many targets he's getting and that kind of thing, it's not nearly as much. But anyways, I think for me personally, 109 to 110, if I was selling him in a rebuild, I'd want slightly more than that. That'd be my only point.
Yeah, I mean, I would be perfectly content with this, but I still think he's a top 15 dynasty running back. I think the days of him being a top 7 or 8 guy is completely gone.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I only have him like 2 spots higher than you do in my dynasty rankings. But 111, 112, this one's pretty straightforward. The guys that we have ranked rookie-wise here, Caleb Johnson, one of those tight ends probably falls to this point, whether it's Loveland or Warren. Jackson Dart, potentially, if you really needed a quarterback, this is about the highest I could take him. And then Luther Burden and, RJ Harvey, again, probably the highest I could take those guys as well. If you have Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry and you're trying to tear it down, you probably want a late first-round pick for it because they're worth probably slightly even more than this based on production value if they're both healthy. But at the same time, you probably won't get much more than this, at least in a sharper league.
I had McCaffrey in my buys window for the trade these picks for players. It is completely team dependent, like you said. And the other video we were doing, you're a contender trying to get production. The elite upside that McCaffrey has is worth this pick. On the inverse, if you have McCaffrey and you're retooling, this value right now could be the highest you see for McCaffrey. The reason why I'm willing to bake it in the other video is because the production value, if he does stay healthy, is so high to the point where you're willing to take that risk. And this one, because you don't need his production, why would you take that risk?
No, exactly. If this is the fair market value, 111, 112 for Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, ideally, you'd get slightly more than that. You'd get 106 to 110 for Christian McCaffrey if you were selling him.
Yeah.
But you probably won't get that in any sharp league. So you kind of have to settle for 111, 112.
For sure. And it's funny, obviously, you have the aging running backs. I don't know what to make of them wide receivers. Brandon Ayuk, I think, is a superstar level talent. The problem is he wasn't productive when he was on the field. He tore his ACL and he's getting older. And if you're not productive and you don't have high implied upside, it's tough for me to get there at wide receiver. Because honestly, we talked about this off camera. 17 to 30 at wide receiver right now is a giant clusterfuck. And I would consider Brandon Ayuk and Jalen Waddle in said clusterfuck. If you can get, in my opinion, my own valuations, I personally would rather have either of the rookie wide receivers between Burden and between Golden. But even if you're saying, okay, I want Colston Loveland here, I want Tyler Warren here, maybe I want to move one of these guys for a young running back like Caleb Johnson. That's what I'm willing to do. Because quite frankly, when I'm looking at Ayuk and Waddle, there's a real possibility like the McLaurin, like the, what's the other one? DJ Moore, like they're just really irrelevant in the scope of Dynasty. Like if you're in a start 12, start 13, sure, maybe they have value. Start 9 or 10 leagues, these guys have no value.
Yeah, again, me and you, I still think guys like this have value in a league where you have to start up to 4 wide receivers every single week. But
it's not 111, 112 value.
Yeah, here's why I agree with you in principle that these guys are good shops if you're a rebuilding team. If Brandon Ayuk by week 5 is not playing games, he's not even healthy, or maybe he is playing games but doesn't look good, he's going to lose value. Jalen Waddle, with how bad he's been the last couple of years, if he's not producing week 5, week 6, he's going to lose a lot of value. So that's why it's a good sell, is that these guys are pretty volatile to the point that like, you better produce or you're going to be worth a mid-second round pick pretty soon.
Yeah, and I mentioned the names that I did. Even if you're a big RJ Harvey guy, I think that's fine too. But realistically, those are all assets I think have a big time opportunity to gain value. Whereas at this point, Ayuk and Waddle would literally have to go back to being superstar versions of themselves, which we haven't seen at least in a calendar and a half year.
The only thing that they have going for them is that they are good players.
Yeah, really. That's really the only thing you can hold your hat on. I would rather mitigate risk and buy good players for a second and maybe a third rather than spending the 111 and 112. That kind of goes back to the principle that we talked about at the beginning of the video.
Yeah, if Matthew Golden had 900 yards and 6 touchdowns next year, he would be worth a lot more than Brandon Ayuk has on 900 yards and 6 touchdowns next year.
Yep, exactly.
For sure. So that was the end of this video. Trade these players for picks. Again, we did this from the seller's frame of mind. If you are trying to rebuild, trying to tear it down, trying to get younger, trying to retool, maybe you have a couple assets on your team that you just think are overvalued, like we talked about with Penix, and we talked about maybe even with DJ Moore, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Some of the guys we talked about were more kind of just overvalued type of guys. So if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. The reason we're making videos like this is because we updated our trade value charts, which if you guys go in to our trade value charts, you can see, okay, what is Puka Nacua worth on the open market? Okay, Bush and Danny have him valued as the 101 in Superflex, the 101 and 1 quarterback. In future rookie picks, he's worth about 2 mid-first rounders plus, etc. You can see exactly what your dynasty assets that you have on your team are worth on the open market in our opinions. And of course, you can use our trade calculator over on flockfantasy.com as well. So if that all interests you, you can check it out. That'll be linked down below in the pinned comment. Rankings, trade value chart, dynasty rookie draft guide underwent a big update after the draft. Rookie prospect models, all that good stuff is available there. So if you want it, check it out. And then, yeah, that should be it for this video. And stay tuned. We're going to do the second round picks as well. Trade these players away for second round picks, trade these second round picks away for players as well. So stay tuned for those videos. Those will be coming in the next couple of days. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.